Woohoo! Hello, everyone. It is so exciting to be here with you to deliver the pitching masterclass as a part of the Next Gen Awards. Now, before we get started, I would just like to say an acknowledgement of the country, just paying respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Maddie and I am 26 years old. I am the program manager here at BOP Industries. A little bit about me: straight out of high school, I went to university and I did a double degree in business and media and communications. Last year, I actually added on a master's of teaching degree, majoring in primary education. And a little fun fact about me, I also have lived in America on a student exchange program. So if any of you guys still in high school considering a student exchange, if you ever want to ask me any questions or you're interested to learn more about a student exchange program, feel free to ask away. But otherwise, let's get into it. Alrighty, so welcome to the masterclass. Now, this is a jam-packed masterclass. We have a lot in store for you guys over the next hour. So it's really important you have that pen, piece of paper, a laptop ready, somewhere to take notes, as we'll be giving you guys loads of information for ways that you can really enhance your pitching and communication skills. So in terms of what we have in store for you over the next hour, by the end of this masterclass, you will have 1, identified your pitch persona. Number 2, learn how to structure an effective pitch presentation. Number 3, explored persuasive speaking techniques. And number 4, understood the importance of communication and structuring emails. So that's what we have in store for you guys. Make sure that you have a drink, make sure you have a snack, somewhere to write notes, sit back and relax. We'll take it from here. Now, as you guys are aware, this amazing webinar has been sponsored and is part of our very first national awards, which is the Next Gen Awards. Now, applications close in 20 days. So if you are thinking about applying, make sure you get those applications in, or if you'd like to nominate someone, you can also nominate someone and you can actually send them the form and they can fill out the form for themselves. Now, something that I really want to note as well is if you are someone that is thinking of applying for one of these awards, I would highly, highly encourage that you also think about nominating for multiple awards. So for example, if you were thinking of, yep, I'm going to apply for the Young Innovator of the Year, I would highly recommend looking into the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha of the Year and see if you apply for one of those as well. Same goes for Young Leader, same goes for Young Entrepreneur. It's really good to try and see how many potential categories you could fit yourself into. And honestly, you never know which one you might win. So that is all I'm going to say on that. You've got 20 days to put those applications in. Super, super exciting. We're already seeing some phenomenal applications come through. Now, as a special announcement, this is the very first time we are saying this, but we officially have a stacked lineup of incredible judges from across Australia. I'm not going to go into detail about each of these because we're going to be saying a lot about them across all our social media channels, but this is our amazing judging panel who will be judging each of our nominations that come through for the Next Gen Awards. So if you are thinking of being a part of the Next Gen Awards, if you're thinking about putting an application in, it's not just about, oh, maybe I'll win something or maybe I'll win a prize. It's also the opportunity to actually get to connect and meet each of these amazing people at our awards ceremony as well. So there's so many opportunities to actually network with some incredible judges. And if you want to find out more about these judges, just head to our website. We've got a little spiel about all of them on there. Otherwise, keep an eye out on our socials. Now, before we get started, we cannot get started until we say a massive, massive thank you to our sponsors, because without them, the Next Gen Awards would not be possible. So I would like to thank Federation Uni, the Brisbane City campus, for sponsoring our Young Innovator of the Year award. We've also got Bond University Transformer, who is sponsoring our Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. Now, in recent news, we've actually had the Queensland, the Office of the Chief Entrepreneur of the Queensland Chief Entrepreneur come on board, which means Advanced Queensland and the Queensland government are officially sponsoring our Next Gen Awards and sponsoring the young people that will be applying for it. Over in WA, we've also got the Fogarty Foundation, and we've actually got a webinar coming up with them very, very soon next week, which will be very exciting. But they are sponsoring all our fabulous little kiddos over in WA. And also, we also have APL&G as part of another sponsor, and they are sponsoring all of our Gladstone kiddos up north in Queensland. So a massive thank you to our sponsors, because none of this would be possible without you guys. And if you'd like to read up a little bit more of our sponsors, we've also got some things going in the chat very, very soon, and you'll be able to read more about them there. Okie dokie, we're going to jump straight into the masterclass, guys. So before we even get started about all the tools and all the techniques, it's really important to think about, well, why do we pitch? Why should I be listening to this masterclass? Why is all of this important to me? I'm sure you've heard it from your parents. I'm sure you've heard it from your teachers, but communication skills is really, really important. So we actually pitch every single day. So it's not just for business. We don't just pitch in front of sharks at the Shark Tank or pitch in front of judges for money. There's a lot of different reasons that we pitch. And more often than not, you probably have done a lot of these different different speeches in a lot of your everyday life. So for example, we pitch every day when we, for example, if we want to seek funding for a business, you're going to have to know how to pitch your product and persuade people. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to refine those speaking skills. Even if you've had to tell a friend something, maybe you've had a friend that's really down one day and you've had to cheer them up, and you've had to say all these different persuasive things to be like, you're amazing, you know you can do this. That is tools of persuasion as well. That is also pitching. If you go for a job interview, some of you already might have a job, maybe you don't, who knows? But in the future, you will have to go for a job interview. And in this job interview, you are going to have to sell yourself. So you're going to have really good communication skills to do that. Maybe you've been working in this job for a few years, you've aced the interview with your amazing pitching skills, and now you want to ask for a raise. So that's another thing. You're going to have to put on your big adult pants, go to your boss, and actually persuade them as to why you're deserving of a raise. And you're more likely to get that raise if you can communicate it really, really clearly. The next one that I'm sure all of you have had experience in is persuading your parent or guardian. Now, this is something that I'm sure all of you, probably not at the time, thought you were doing effective pitching communication or persuasive techniques, but I'm sure all of you have had to persuade a parent or guardian to let you do something on the weekend or to buy a certain thing somewhere. There's some sort of persuasion skills there, and trust me, I'm sure you're already very well versed within that particular one. The next one is school or university assessment. You guys are quite lucky that nowadays you don't always have to speak in front of a class. Since COVID, you've been able to record your speeches. You've also been able to just maybe speak to it with the teacher. But back in my day, which wasn't too long ago, but back in my day, we had to speak in front of the whole class for our assessment. Now, they are not as kind still in university. So if you're thinking of going to university, there's a really strong chance you're going to have to get in front of the class and actually speak about a particular presentation. The next one is communicating with customers. If you were thinking of getting a casual or a part-time role when you're a teenager or when you go to university or TAFE or take a gap year, whatever that might be, you are going to have to learn how to communicate with customers. That is going to be a part of your job. Maybe you work in retail, maybe you work in hospitality, who knows, but that will be a part of your job. And last but not least, but this is the obvious one, is presenting a speech. Yes, you might have to do it at school, but 10, 15, 20 years down the track, you might have to do a speech at a wedding. You might have to do a speech at another type of event. Your boss might ask you to do a speech for your company out of the blue. You've got no idea. So it's really important that you refine these skills now and use them consistently in the future. Now, why does it matter? Why is it so important that we learn how to pitch? Number one, is that communication skills are the most sought after attribute by employers when hiring new team members. So, for example, I know that we've hired people recently, and in that interview, we're really looking at that person's communication skills and their ability to actually communicate their ideas, their thoughts, and their opinions. That is a really big tick to someone to get them through the door if they've got great communication skills. The next one is growing your network. So I'm going to say this a few times throughout this presentation, but it's really all about who you know. So it's really important that you understand effective communication skills so that you can actually navigate conversations and make more friends within the professional industries and grow your network there. And last but not least is making a difference. If you are someone who wants to make a difference in the world, then if you can speak it, you can influence. And if you can influence, you can change. And so it's really important that if you're someone that's really passionate about making a difference in the world, that you think about embracing your communication skills and trying to think about how you can communicate better. Now, as you might have seen, there have been some little pop-up bubbles below, and that is past you guys. The question is, what do you struggle with the most when it comes with public speaking? Now, did you know that up to 75% of our population has a fear of public speaking? So if you are someone that does have a particular problem when it comes to public speaking, I know that when I was in school, it was always the speed of how fast I spoke. So that was always something that someone had to say to me a couple of times is, oh, make sure you slow down. Maybe you're someone that really struggles with eye contact. Maybe you're someone that really struggles with tone variation. Maybe you're someone that really struggles with body language and you always feel like you have to cross your arms or something. You never know. But if you have any particular questions at all, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of this session. Alrighty, so having a look at different types of pitch personas, because all of us pitch in very, very different ways. I know that for us at Bob Industries, I know that there's myself, there's Scott, there's Sophie, there's Emma, there's Kate, there's Sienna, and we all pitch in very different ways. So we all have a very unique pitch persona, but I'm going to go through a few different people that you all will know, I would hope. And I'm going to describe what their pitch persona is like. And then I'm going to ask you what type of pitch persona you think you might be. So the very first one is the persona of the visionary innovator. Now, someone that really embodies the visionary innovator is someone like Elon Musk. Now, this type of pitch persona is characterized by someone who's really enthusiastic, quite creative, and they've got a really strong sense of their vision of the future. Now, they tend to talk to a crowd using vivid language, descriptive language, and storytelling, and being like, if we do this, and if we do this, look what we could achieve. And that's very fitting for Elon Musk, who's obviously done so many amazing things with Tesla, the very first electric motor that was commercialized. We've also got SpaceX. He's a massive visionary. So that is one persona to keep in mind. The next one is looking at someone like Steve Jobs, who would be considered someone like the analytical expert. So if you're someone that's very practical, very logical, you like the facts, you probably would gravitate towards someone like Steve Jobs, someone that's really analytical. Now, when Steve Jobs used to speak to his crowds back in the day when he was running Apple and launching all the new products, whenever he spoke to his crowds, he always used research and analysis that really supported why each of these new features on the iPhone or new features on the iPad would make a really big difference to the consumer. And that's what was really fitting because his audience were also very similar to him. So that's what worked really well for Steve Jobs. Now, last but definitely not least is our empathetic storyteller. Now, this can be someone compared to someone such as Oprah Winfrey. So she was a very successful talk show host for many, 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 many years. And the reason she was so successful is because she was really good at being empathetic with the people opposite her in the other chair that she was interviewing. She's very good at understanding other people and therefore having conversations with a lot of depth, with a lot of meaning, and be able to understand people and tell them and give them really great advice. So what we're going to do is I want to figure out what your pitch persona is. So the very first way to do that is to reflect on your style. And if you're someone that doesn't do a lot of speeches, I'm speaking about reflecting on your style with your friends, with your family. How do you normally come across in a conversation? Is it someone that's like really enthusiastic and is like talking about all these amazing ideas? Is it someone that's like really thinking about data and analytics and research you've recently written? Or is it someone where like, oh, it made me feel like this, or I feel like this, or it made that person feel like this? Are you talking about feelings? You're talking about emotions. The next one is to identify your strengths. So thinking about what situations are you really comfortable speaking in versus what situations are you not so comfortable speaking in. So for example, if you're someone like Elon Musk, who's a visionary, you might be like, I love the big crowds because I want to try and motivate the big crowds. Whereas if you're someone like the empathetic storyteller like Oprah, you might prefer that one-to-one conversation or the more intimate settings with less people. The next one is to consider your audience. So at the end of the day, your persona changes depending on your audience. So for me personally, at BOP, we work with both primary age students and high school students, which means my persona needs to change to accommodate different ages of students. So it's also important to remember that as well. So I want to figure out what your persona is. I want you to have a think. If you had to present a speech in front of, let's say, your class or the entire school, and you wanted it to be the best speech ever, which of these personas can you see yourself doing? Or what would you aspire to be like? Would you be the visionary innovator? So someone who's really creative and passionate and forward thinking, charismatic and innovative. Would you be someone who wanted to be the analytical expert? Would you be logical, data driven, thorough, credible, objective? Or would you be someone like the empathetic storyteller, where you're emotional, you're relatable, you're vulnerable, you're compassionate, and you're engaging? Pop your answers in the chat below and we'll get moving on shortly. So having a think which one you might be: visionary innovator, analytical expert, or empathetic storyteller. You might be a mixture of all three. Who knows? Have a think. Put your answers in the chat. Alrighty, we are going to keep on moving along, everyone. So hopefully you've had a little bit of a think about what type of persona you might be. Feel free to take a screenshot or take a photo of this screen, but you want to always think about what kind of speaker would I aspire to be like, all right? So you really want to think about that as well. Alrighty, now getting into those tools and those techniques of persuasive speaking. So let's think about how we can really capture a crowd. What types of things do we need to know? And what kind of tools and abilities can we really take away from this masterclass? So in this little segment, we are going to be talking about things like tone variation, things like body language, hand gestures, effective pauses, and eye contact. So these are the most important parts of a speech. So let's have a look at how we can improve each of these different skills. Alrighty, so the very first one is tone variation. Now, a fun fact about tone variation, even though someone might say, oh, you need to have more varied tone, you need to put, less monotone, it needs to be more fun and exciting. A fun fact about tone variation is you are more likely to actually sound monotone if you are reading word for word. So a lot of the time in, let's say, school settings, we can get really caught up with this really easily, where you have palm cards and they're written word for word. And what that makes you end up doing is you end up relying solely on your palm cards and you end up reading word for word, and it sounds really, really monotone. To give you an example, and this will probably sound a little bit familiar to you if you've ever had to have anyone read off anything before. Let's say I'm going to read what's on the screen here. So I'm going to say, to keep your audience engaged, it's important to use a variety of tones in your speech. The interesting thing about tone is that it is more likely to change naturally if you are not reading off a script. You have a stronger chance of sounding a bit monotone if you are directly reading off the screen or palm cards. And see how I barely had any emotions on my face. I wasn't using any hand gestures. It was very, very monotone, the whole experience, not just the reading. So if you were trying to think about how you can actually have more tone variation within your speeches, that is why your teachers say, try and use dot points on your palm cards, or just use the screen and just read off the dot points, because you're more likely to have more of a conversational tone with the audience. Now, if you are someone that gets really, really shy and you're like, no, I really need my palm cards and they really need to say every single word, that is okay. Look at the points I have listed below. So for example, use questions. We know when we ask a question, our voice tends to go up at the very end. So do you want to ask a question? Is that what you want to ask? Our voice goes up a little bit when we ask a question. Next one is to incorporate exclamation points. So have sentences in there that sound exciting and make it seem like you want to almost yell them in a sense, but you want to get really excited about them. The next one is short sentences. So if you want to have more tone variation, again, if you are reading word for word off a sentence, you're more likely to sound monotone. So keep those sentences short and sweet. And lastly, have some words actually bolded or underlined that you want to emphasize. That's really important. So if you must have palm cards and you must have every single word, then put those points at the very bottom. Use questions, exclamation marks, exclamation points, short sentences, and bold and underline words. All right, our next one is body language and hand gestures. Now, a couple of really, really easy tips for body language and hand gestures. The number one is that if you have your shoulders hunched forward like this, like if I was doing this webinar like this, it would seem like I was very disinterested and I didn't really want to be here. But if I'm sitting up like this, I suddenly, just by putting my shoulders back, I appear so much more confident. It's a really, really simple trick. And you can do that by actually just writing on your palm card. See how I've written on the bottom, stand up straight or keep one hand at least free. Those are things that you can consider doing. Now, when it comes to hand gestures, I like to tell students this and remind them of this, because once you hear it once, you might think about it again. And if you're someone that gets really shy getting up in front of the crowd or the class and you have to speak, if you're someone who actually has your hands over your belly of any sort, so you have them in front of you, maybe you're tucking an arm, you can't really see my stomach, but imagine you have, the hands crossed over the body. That is actually a natural instinct of our bodies when we go into fight or flight mode. So it means that our nervous system actually thinks that we're in danger. So it likes to protect our natural organs. Fun fact about why you do that. It's because when you get really scared of public speaking, your body is like, danger, and tries to protect it. That's why your natural instinct is to go over your belly. So I want you to think about that. Next time you get in front of a class, if you're someone who is like, and you tend to cross your arms or you tend to kind of shy away, I want you to think about, okay, I'm not in danger. I'm just standing up. I'm all good. I'm safe. I'm in a safe environment. And try and see how you can maybe just put your hands to your side, use a palm card, even actually behind your back is better than in front. One of those. But yeah, that's my first few tips for body language and hand gestures. The next one is effective pauses and eye contact. It's really easy to have an effective pause and look at someone in the eyes. You kind of go to it. They're kind of hand in hand. You can't really have an effective pause without eye contact. But eye contact is sometimes the most daunting part of speaking. I know that so many people, and it's really hard when you're in a school setting because you're usually around friends. And so it's really easy to make eye contact with your friends and almost want to have a little bit of a giggle, or you maybe want to go, oh, you're scaring me. Like this is making me more nervous. So my biggest tip when it comes to eye contact a lot of the time is that if you are someone that is the be all end all, that is what scares you, then just make sure your eyes are just facing up and outwards. So for example, if you're in a classroom, right now, I could be looking into the camera, but I'm actually just looking straight ahead of me, and it still almost looks like the exact same presentation. The main thing that you want to look at when you speak is you don't want to have your voice projecting down because you can't really hear anything. You want to make sure your voice is projecting out, which is why your eyes need to just be facing, even if that's just looking at the back of the room. The other option is you can also look at someone's shoulder. It looks very similar to you making them look at their eyes. Now, when effective pauses come into play, you will need to make eye contact with people, because effective pauses are very easy to do, but it requires you to have a bit of practice with your speech and to really understand exactly what you want to emphasize. Exhibit ABC. Moving on. All right, so we've had a little bit of a practice of, not a practice, sorry. We've had a little bit of a look, a bit of an explore about different type of persuasive techniques. So we are going to play a quick activity, and how this is going to work is you are going to choose a topic you know a lot about. If you get really confused, think about what you did today. Think about what you ate for breakfast. Think about what you're doing on the weekend, something that you know a lot about. And what's going to happen is we're going to play the music, and I'm going to get off screen for 90 seconds or for a minute and a half. So what's going to happen during this time is we really want you to try and talk for a consistent 90 seconds. And we want you to try and avoid using any filler words. So for example, filler words are when we say, but, oh, so, oh, like it was really like this, or I think it was like this. So we really want to try and avoid those filler words. I'm always guilty of it for sure, but it's really important to start drawing awareness to it and to really see if you're someone that uses a lot of filler words. So what we're going to do, we're going to chuck the music on. I'm going to disappear for 90 seconds. And we want you to try and think if you can actually try and speak for 90 seconds straight without saying like, but, or so. All right. Okay, here we go. Are we ready? Let's go. All right, that is 90 seconds. It seriously feels like forever when it's only a minute and 30 seconds. So if you are someone who said a lot of but, like, or so, like you caught yourself talking, that is something to think about for next time. So as you can see on the screen, pop the topic that you spoke about in the chat. Did you talk about your day? Did you talk about your breakfast? Did you talk about your animal? What did you talk about? Let us know. But that is a really, really simple activity. How we recommend doing it if you are with other people as well is actually doing it with a partner and to go back and forth. So have someone speak for a minute, 30 seconds and count how many times they say filler words and vice versa. Get them to go and they count for you. That's a really great way to actually see how many filler words that you say. Alrighty, moving on to our next little section, which is structuring for impact. So there's really, really easy ways that you can structure a presentation for the most optimal effect. And we're going to show you a structure that we use across all of our programs that's relatable to basically any sort of setting. So make sure you have a notepad down to write these down, or you're ready to take some photos. So we have a thing called an 8-step pitching structure. And these 8 steps are really crucial to making sure that you cover absolutely everything that's involved in your pitch, basically. So a lot of the time when we try and think about how we're going to plan maybe a presentation or how we're going to plan slides, sometimes we get really, really stuck with kind of thinking about, well, what do I really like? What order do I put in? What order makes sense? So this is a structure that you can use across multiple types of presentations. So we highly recommend jotting these down. Alrighty, so step number 1 is a catchy intro. Your audience knows within 20 seconds if they are going to engage in your presentation or disengage in your presentation. I am sure that you can think about an experience where you have listened to someone that you thought was rather dull, and you probably knew that within the first 20 seconds of them saying something, being like, I am not going to enjoy this presentation at all. You probably had experience with that. So it's really important that you capture that audience attention in the first 20 seconds. Number 2, before you even talk about your cool solutions, you want to talk about the problem. So they want to really figure out, why am I listening to you today? Why is it really important that your solution is a solution? What do I want to know about? What is the problem? So actually articulate and define what the problem is that you're trying to solve with the solution. Now, number 3 is the shiny solution. So what have you come up with? What do you want to share? That goes into this section, part 3. But you even expand on it more by number 4. So don't just actually tell us like, oh, I invented this, or I'm selling this product, or I would like to create this new initiative. Actually explain how it works. A lot of the time, us as presenters know exactly how things work. We know exactly what our ideas are and how they'll function. But there's a lot of the time that our audience knows not a single thing. So it's really important that you explain exactly how your solution will work. This is also a really great part to put in any sort of research, statistics, or figures that support your solution. So for example, this is really going to help XYZ that we addressed in, say, problem, because it addresses this particular thing through the solution, okay? Now, the back end of this structure are the things that people forget to talk about a lot of the time. A lot of the time, most presentations just kind of think about, hey, I'm this person, here's my solution, that's the end of my presentation. But there is more to it that you can add in. And this is all really valuable stuff, especially if you're ever talking to an audience who is all about the effectiveness of the presentation and the effectiveness of the solution that you're trying to present to them. So step number 5 is the user. Who is actually going to use the solution you're talking about, and how have you actually thought about them when creating this particular solution? Number 6 is the why. So in a world, let's say you're doing a business presentation. Let's say that you come up with a brand new product, right? In a world where the business market is quite oversaturated, there are a lot of people creating businesses nowadays. It has never been easier to create a business thanks to the internet, thanks to our technologies. So why should I listen to you and your idea? Tell us why your idea is unique. Tell us why it stands out. Tell us why it's important that someone invests in it or buys it. Give us the why. That's really important. Number 7 is your ask. So we're actually going to talk about this in the next few slides, but it's really important that you don't just leave your audience with, let's say, thanks for listening, bye. It's really important that you actually give them something to think about. So your ask is, number 1, for example, let's say it's to an investor. Your ask is obviously probably going to be something within the financial sense. But say that, for example, you're speaking to the general public. Maybe it's a follow on my business Instagram account. But I'm going to show you some other ways that you can also word your ask depending on the type of audience you are speaking to. And lastly is your conclusion. So this is your summarizing your solution. So summarizing those key points again, and really think about how can you make them do something after listening to your presentation. So what I mean by that is, first of all, we're going to talk about catchy intro advice, and then I'm going to show you how to finish your pitch presentation with bang. So like I said, the first 20 seconds, very important. So what can you do in those 20 seconds? Here are a few examples. Number 1, you could ask a rhetorical question. So this is basically, we all know what rhetorical questions are. They're not meant to actually be answered, but they're kind of meant to insinuate that everyone has the same answer in their heads. So the examples we have on the screen are examples of us revamping a brand new school. So it's like the days of dull classrooms are over. Don't you think it's time for a new school revamp? And that immediately catches an audience because it's like, yeah, it is. It's something that they understand, and in their heads, they're saying yes. Another thing you can do is, for example, is a quote. So a quote is usually very well written and very much can convey a sense of importance to the audience. So for example, in this one, we've got education is a passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who truly prepare for it today. And this was spoken by Malcolm X, who was the leader of a civil rights movement, whoever important person you put in that. But a quote is a really great way to be like, this is a topic of conversation right now. Look at this particular quote and look at how much it means to this particular type of the general public, etc. Another thing that you can do is say a fact. So this is where you can get a really hard-hitting fact to really shock the audience or educate them on how important the topic is. So for example, this one here, we've got a research project by the Department of Education found the most common effect of introducing technology to students was an increase in motivation. So actually being like, you need to listen to me because this is actually what the Department of Education has said. And that's important. That is very credible. And lastly, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, is audience interaction. It forces the audience to interact with you, not in a verbal sense, usually in a physical sense. So usually like putting up a hand. So for example, we could say, hands up if you've ever attended a class at school where you felt bored. Try and get it something where everyone will put their hand up. But this is a really great way to capture your audience within the first 20 seconds. Now, going back to what I said at the very back of that pitch presentation is don't just finish on a thank you for listening. Finish on a CTA. This is called a call to action. And this is used a lot within the business world, but it's also used a lot within pitch presentations. So what a call to action is what do you want your audience members to do once they finish listening to you? So some examples you can see on the screen are things like, I encourage each of you to, what would you like them to do? How would you like them to change their behavior? Next one. I hope today you've been inspired to make a change in your community, make a change at home, make a change in your behavior. Or next time so what is it that you want to encourage them doing? So next time you look at this, next time you go to do this, what could you change? And that really instills a sense of purpose, first of all, in the audience member and makes them feel like they can really do something that's quite small, but really means a lot. So that's a really great way to actually ask something to your audience and conclude on a really positive, purposeful note. Okie dokie. All right, finishing touches. So some final ways to make your presentation a little bit more sparkly besides just what you say. So the first one is that supporting materials such as slides, it's really, really important that on your slides that you understand, well, first of all, it's written there right at the top, that not everyone is an auditory learner. In fact, I believe there's around 75 or 70% of the population are actually visual learners. So for example, if you had a really good time in primary school with all of the books and all of the cool things around the classroom and you thought it was magical, a lot of us are very visual learners. That's why we love those environments. So when we transition to high school and we're writing everything down all the time, that's when things can get a little bit blurry with our learning. So for example, when you are creating slides, it's really important that your text is large, especially you never know what size screen you have to present on. We've got on here minimum 20-point font. Like what you can see in the rainbow bold, that is 20-point font. The next thing is one idea per slide. It's better to have one idea on a slide and keep it very minimal than to have way too many ideas on a slide. The next one is to repeat your key points. So a lot of the time, let's say that you have a presentation that goes for 10 minutes, even 5 minutes. Your listeners very, very easily can kind of forget exactly what they want to take away from your presentation unless you keep emphasizing what the key points are of that presentation. And last but not least is pictures and graphs are always better than words. One big mistake that people make is if they put too much on the screen during a presentation, is what happens is your audience starts reading the screen. And what that does is it takes away from them listening to you presenting. So it's really important that your supporting materials act as a support. How can they enhance your presentation? Now, we absolutely love Canva. We use Canva for practically everything here at BOP. And the beauty of Canva and why we recommend it to you guys is because there are amazing templates, preloaded templates, just like the ones you see on the screen, that can make your presentation look very schmick. So I would highly, highly recommend jumping on Canva. It is free for students. It is also free for teachers. So highly, highly recommend it. We completely vouch for it. And we definitely think that every single presentation should be using Canva. Lastly is to palm card or not to palm card. When you're in school, understandably, you will probably want to use palm cards because you've most likely written a speech, and it's really important that you stick to that speech because you've written it to base off your grades. That being said, outside of a grading context or outside of a school context, try and avoid palm cards at all costs. For example, I know that when I got into the real world after obviously high school and after university, no speeches I had ever had palm cards ever again. It was only what I saw on the screen. That was the only type of cue I would get to what to say. So it's really important that if you are someone that heavily relies on palm cards, that you start to slowly break them down into things like single dot points, things like singular sentences, or by putting your dot points actually on the screen for your audience to look at. So lastly, some top tips if you are someone that wants to increase their ability to public speak or just generally your communication as well. I would highly, highly recommend looking into your local Toastmasters organization. I was a Toastmaster for about 3 years. Toastmasters also started, I think it was the mid 1900s. It basically started after World War II, when a lot of the men that were working were going into more white collar jobs or office jobs, but they'd just been in things like World War I, World War II, so they didn't have the communication abilities to be able to effectively communicate ideas. So Toastmasters was born. So it is an organization that teaches public speaking and leadership skills, and it is a very successful organization. I absolutely loved being part of a club. I met with them every fortnight, and I was able to not only just network with some amazing people, but I was able to practice impromptu speaking. I was able to also practice different types of speeches. I was able to get feedback on my speeches as well in a very safe and comfortable environment. So highly recommend checking out Toastmasters if you are someone that really wants to get serious about your public speaking. The next one is to volunteer speaking opportunities. Now, this does not mean generally, volunteering to go speak on assembly or speak at an event. This just means that in class, if the teacher says, does someone want to read this particular sentence, that you start putting your hand up. If someone says, hey, can you go deliver this to this person and tell them this, that you start taking that initiative and thinking of new ways you can challenge yourself to interact with new people. That is what it means by volunteer for speaking opportunities. The more you do it, the better you'll get. The next one is read aloud. So making sure that when you are going to do a presentation, or just in general, if you have areas to work on when it comes to pronunciation and articulation, that you also practice just simply reading aloud. That doesn't mean it has to be an actual speech, but reading aloud really helps you understand exactly how you sound and what areas you might need to work on. The next one is to watch online tutorials. So I love watching some of my favorite speakers. I love watching Oprah Winfrey. I know Tony Robbins is another one I love listening to. Gabby Bernstein, Mel Robinson. There are so many different amazing public speakers out there on YouTube that you can just kick back, relax, and see how they actually use public speaking as a tool. And last but not least is attend workshops just like this. So if you are currently watching this workshop or attending this workshop live, give yourself a big tap on the back, because that is just one massive step in the right direction to making sure that you improve your public speaking skills. Now, I just want to conclude this little section before we move on to communication about a few of my mantras, because I've been at BOP now for almost 3 years. a big part of my job is speaking in front of massive crowds. And there has been a lot of things that I've learned along the way. So the first one, and I highly recommend everyone uses this, is to act confident and no one will question you. Even if you don't feel it, even if you pretend to be confident, no one will know the difference. Take on that alternate persona and try and embody someone who's confident. I remember the first time I had to speak in front of a crowd of around 200 and I was given a microphone. I'd never been given a microphone before. And I had no option but just to really act confident. Otherwise, I wasn't going to get any sort of engagement from my crowd. So when in doubt, just pretend you're confident, even if you aren't, even if you've got a sick stomach and you can feel the butterflies going, just pretend. The next one is to smile. So as you might have even noticed on this presentation, I'm really trying to smile, but I'm also enjoying myself as well. But smiling is a really easy way to engage your audience. If you look like a friendly person, if you look like you want to be there, if you look like you're excited, it immediately engages your audience in your presentation. And also vice versa. One thing that I noticed when I first started speaking is I would always try and find the people in the room that were smiling back at me because it made me feel really comfortable. So now whenever I have a student get up the front and speak, I always make sure I'm smiling in the back at them because a smile goes such a long way when it comes to support. And last but not least, we all know this one, practice makes perfect. We've all got to start somewhere. Even the master had to start somewhere. Even the master had to have a few fumbly speeches. Everyone takes time to learn new skills. So get yourself involved with as many different speaking things as possible and understand that every opportunity is just another opportunity to learn and improve for next time as well. Alrighty, we have got our final 15 minutes left of this presentation. So I'm going to quickly go through some professional communication skills. Now, what this little segment is going to be talking about is really why communication is important. So this means talking about emails, talking about text, talking about conversations that you might have with, say, an adult or maybe with a friend, and how we can really build our skills when it comes to communication. But it's really important, like we said at the very beginning, communication is the most highly sought out skill across employers, but it's also really, really important if you are someone that's a young entrepreneur or a young innovator or a young leader, that you know how to effectively communicate your ideas, your thoughts, your opinions, etc. So to be a really good communicator, there are 4 essential skills that are involved, and that is empathy, conflict resolution, teamwork, and networking. If you can master each of these skills, you will be unstoppable in the real world of professionals. So the first one is empathy. I know that when I grew up, I was always told you will make more friends by being interested in other people than by talking about yourself. And this is also where the role of empathy comes in. If you want to be able to work really well with a team, if you really want to be able to understand, let's say, a customer or a user or your audience, then listen to what they have to say. Have empathy as well with what they're saying and be an active listener within that. The next one is conflict resolution. So let's say that there might be a bit of friend drama. Let's say there might be a bit of work drama. Something has happened and there's been a miscommunication. Usually all conflict is from some sort of miscommunication and 2 different perspectives not seeing eye to eye. So it's really important, if you are a communicator, if you're a really good communicator, you can really easily resolve conflict because you can effectively empathize and effectively communicate exactly what type of thing needs to happen to resolve that conflict. And it makes it a lot easier for both people to understand. The next one is teamwork. We've all had experiences working in a team where someone does something differently to what we expected them to do or what we wanted them to do. And again, all of this comes down to miscommunication, usually, most of the time. So to be able to work really well in a team, it's important that you master the skill of communicating your expectations, your thoughts, your opinions, and you also think about that empathy of understanding your team members, understanding that conflict resolution, hearing both sides of the story. That's really important. And last but not least is networking. So understanding how to network. It's really important that you learn how to, for example, strike up a conversation or how to carry a conversation with different people. Now, how this works, again, is being that active listener and using those empathy skills to basically listen to someone and figure out, okay, you've just said X, Y, Z about what you've just told me. How can I relate to that? And how can I comment on that? Or how can I talk about a similar experience that I've had? So that's a really great way to start networking with other people, is honestly just asking them questions about themselves, getting them to tell you more about certain things until you find a common thread that you can link to. That's how you can network really effectively. Now, going into those 3 pillars of communication. So last but not least is really understanding how to avoid that miscommunication and get really clear with your communication skills. Number 1 is it's really important to know your audience. So for example, when we talk around our friends, maybe our family, we might use like some slang words. We might, be really casual or say some throwaway comments. That doesn't matter because it's in a casual setting. But if you go to, let's say, an interview, if you're talking to your boss, if you were talking at a networking event, it's really important that you change the way you communicate into a way that is familiar with that particular person in that particular setting. So it's important that you maybe don't say all the slang words, that you maybe sound a little bit more formal, and you've got those abilities to be able to network with that person and really build a strong foundation using formal communication styles. The next one, and like I was saying in the previous slide, is listen to your audience. So active listening. Like I said, what's really important is to understand what that person is saying. And if they're, for example, let's say they are trying to be like, I really feel this way and I really need something to change, that you have an active role in empathizing with that person and figuring out what's the best way forward. Being an active listener is really, really important. And lastly is to be clear with your audience. So in The Author's Purpose, who is a very famous book about effective communication, they suggest that when we write an email or type out a text or talk to someone, a lot of the time we need to understand the why. So why are we actually talking to this person? Is it to inform? Is it to entertain? Or is it to persuade? Or are we just rambling here? What are we really talking about? So it's really important that when you are texting maybe someone, or if you are writing an email, that you are really clear with what is the why here. Alrighty, we're going to talk you guys through an email structure, because emails can be confusing. And when you first start writing some professional emails, sometimes you're like, no one's ever taught me how to do this. So we're going to teach you how to write an effective email. So hopefully you've got a pen and paper ready, or you're ready to take some photos. Alrighty, so this is a 7-step email structure. We love our 7-step. We love our 8-step. Number 1 is the subject line. Now, the subject line on most computers and most phones, for example, is really, really small. So you want to keep it really concise, really short, and straight to the point. This particular example we're going to go through is, let's say that you really want to have an internship at this organization that you have been obsessed with and you love, and you'd love to work there one day. So you want to see if you can get an internship at this particular organization. So your email line, internship availabilities. I want to find out, are there internships available? Number 2 is the greeting. So before you go straight into, do you have any internships available? You say, for example, hi, Gary, I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. So you're actually showing, remember that communication skills, empathy, and being an active listener and contributing to the conversation. So showing that you're a good communicator from the get-go is a really good sign. Number 3 is the why. So before you jump into the question, you want to actually provide a bit of an understanding as to why are you emailing them. So here we've got, I'm sending you this email because I hope to work for your organization in the future and thought you would be the best person to get in contact with regarding internship opportunities for myself. So like, oh, great. Okay. Beautiful. They've had a really nice greeting. So this person sounds lovely. Next of all, they've actually praised the organization and expressed interest. This sounds really good. I'm going to keep reading this email. Next up, we get to the body. So this is where we contain any sort of relevant details about what the purpose of this email is. So for example, we've said, it would be amazing if I could find out if you have any spaces available and how I could obtain one of these positions. So this is talking about how you could potentially get an internship at this organization. And then making sure that you don't just leave it at the body text, you actually add in the ask. Like I said, with that call to action, it's really important that there's a reason that the person who's listening to you, that's looking at the screen, that's understanding, okay, what is the point of this speech? What is the point of this email? So for example, we've said, I'd love to jump on a call and chat further. If this is convenient to you, would you be interested in helping me out? So that is an example of how you would structure the body text of an email. Now, in terms of the sign off, there's a few different ways that you can do this, but most professional emails follow the same type of sign off. I know that at BOP, all of us have different ways of signing off our emails. And I think it's really important that you actually establish your own type of unique way to sign off on an email, because the ones you see on the screen, as you can see, are really, really common and sometimes can seem a little bit, generic. So it's really important that maybe you think about a type of sign off that really, really suits you. So for example, the ones we see all the time are sincerely and regards and kind regards. They are very, very common. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you are someone that does end up sending a lot of emails later on, it's really nice to actually have your own spin on what your sign off might be. Mine is kindest, and then I say Maddie. I know that Scott is speak soon a lot of the time. So it's really important that you try and almost define your own way of signing off emails, because it makes the email feel a little bit more personable. And lastly is an email signature. So a lot of the time, it's really easy to create an email signature within whatever mail platform you're working in. You should be able to find it across the top tab somewhere. Otherwise, you can always create an email signature in Canva and then actually pop it onto, insert it into your mailbox and actually have that as the email signature there. So it's just making it appear more formal and make it seem more legitimate. Alrighty, guys, that is officially a wrap on our pitching and professional communication masterclass. I hope you've all learned something from today. Now, a bit of a recap. What we've done in just the last 60 minutes is we have identified our pitch persona. We have learned how to structure an effective pitch presentation. We have explored persuasive speaking techniques. And number 5, we've also understood the importance of communication and learned how to structure emails. Now, again, before we sign off, guys, a massive, massive thank you to our sponsors. Like I said at the beginning, this type of awards would not be possible without their support. So a massive thank you to Federation University, Bond University Transformer, the Office of the Queensland Chief Entrepreneur, Advanced Queensland and the Queensland Government, the Fogarty Foundation, and APLNG. We thank you so, so much. And don't forget to tune in for another masterclass, which will be next week as part of the Fogarty Foundation. We actually have some really exciting people that will be joining us on that webinar. So it's not just the BOP team, it's actually a lot of other really exciting people. So make sure you register. You can go to that bit.ly link at the very bottom, that way, yeah. You can hit the bit.ly link at the bottom of the screen, or type that in. It's a really short link, and register your place for the webinar. It should be a really, really interesting one, and I'm really excited for it. Now, as a reminder, we have 20 days to go until the Next Gen Awards applications are closed. 20 days. So make sure that if you are thinking about putting in an application in, that you do so in the next 20 days. As a reminder, and how I said at the very beginning of this presentation, don't just apply for one, try and apply for as many as you can. If you're thinking of applying for the Young Innovator of the Year or the Young Entrepreneur of the Year, have a look and see if you could also apply for the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha or the Young Leader. Have a look to see if your application can go across different categories. It's really important that you have a look into that, because you have no idea if one category might have less people in it than another category. You didn't hear it from me. So have a look and see if there's any other applications you want to put in. Remember, you can also nominate someone. So make sure you get those applications in the next 20 days. Alrighty, guys, that brings us to the very end of our masterclass. I hope that you have all taken away something from today. As a reminder, this entire stream will be uploaded directly to YouTube straight away. So if you want to come back and you want to listen to something, or you want to share something with your friends, anything like that, you're more than welcome to. You'll always be able to access this particular live stream on YouTube whenever you'd like. But thank you guys so much. You have been absolutely an amazing audience. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday night. And we'll see you next time, hopefully next week at the Fergity Foundation. Bye, guys.